Good morning, everybody. We're very excited to be interviewing our guest, Tom Nash, in a moment. So we thank you all for joining us today. Just a few housekeeping points. This webinar will last just 30 minutes. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask, there is a little chat box you can write them down in. If we get inundated with questions, which I don't expect, we probably won't have time to go through them at the end, because we'll just give a few minutes at the very end, because I know we've all got very busy lives to answer those questions. If we can't answer them on the day, we'll follow up by email. So with no further ado, I'm going to just introduce Tom. Tom is a business and personal coach. In recent years, he's specialised more in divorce coaching. So I've got this burning question to ask you, Tom. Why would anyone need a divorce coach?
Great question. So good morning, everyone. As Tony mentions, I'm a life and business coach. I specialise in divorce and separation. It's something I have a personal life experience of well over 30 years and are now certified in various areas of. So why would someone need a divorce coach? Well, when we're going through divorce or separation, it's one of those challenging times of life where we need to be operating at our best. But subsequently, we tend to be operating at our worst with all the challenges that we're facing emotionally, financially, etc. So coaching is more around creating a more positive support network for you, and that can assist you through the roller coaster of the emotions, helping you rebuild your lives thereafter. Sometimes the support networks that we have around us, loved ones, friends, family, they will come from a place of love and protection, but sometimes aren't necessarily the most positive impact. So coaching is a way of helping to challenge situations and helping assist clients to realise their own strengths that they have inside, their opportunities, the resources that are available to them, and teaching them coping skills and techniques and mindset tools to help them create a better outcome and work through this challenging time in a more positive way.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Could you give us a couple of examples, perhaps, of how you've been able to help people going through this very painful process, Tom?
Yeah, sure. I've got many, so I'll try and keep it to a few. And obviously, every situation is so unbelievably unique with different circumstances and outside factors. One quick example, I suppose, and it's kind of relevant, I suppose, with lockdown and COVID. I was working with a client. This was pre-lockdown, just a gentleman in the first instance. He and his former partner and their young child had already been cohabitating pre-lockdown for about the last 9 months. Communication had drastically broken down whilst living in the same house, and it wasn't a massive house, it wasn't the West Wing, it was a typical family 3-4 bed home, and they only communicated through WhatsApp. They wouldn't spend time together. They had handover periods to deal with their child, so not the greatest situation to be in. And that they were actually coming up to their final court hearing as well around their child arrangement order and how that was going to play out. So over the course of a couple of months, working with both the gentleman in the first instance and then later on his partner, we're actually able to get them to a stage where they could now communicate face to face. They could understand each other's communications, have more empathy, and actually get to the point where they actually now sit down and have dinner every evening together with their son. They're not best friends, but they're able to create a more positive environment for their child. And they're actually able to come to a mutual agreement that benefited them and their child outside of court before the final hearing. So there's, like I say, there's many different experiences that people feel through anxieties or procrastination in scenarios where they're picking up the children from the former matrimonial home, or a breakdown in communications with the children. So that's just a few examples there of some of the work that we do.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. So how do you think you can help people to reduce their negative feelings towards the other half? Because these negative thoughts and attitudes really affect people badly, like those examples you've just used. How can you help them to do that?
Yeah, well, through a variation of what I call blended coaching, really. So it's traditional coaching strategies and questioning and looking at options and opportunities, but we also call on I'm a master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming and timeline therapy, so that calls on your conscious and subconscious cognitive behaviours, language patterns and things like that, and how you use language and communication. So there's no, let's say, Jedi mind trick or switch to flick it on or off. It's more of a process and a learning, to be honest with you. So it's through using a variety of mindset tools and techniques, such as anchoring, parts integration, timeline therapy, and things like that. It's also helping a client understand how they receive communication, both verbal and non-verbal, because that can help understand and reduce negative feelings. But in terms of some takeaway tools, maybe, and steps that people could take today from watching this and listening now, is from your communication strategy, is taking time to think about if you're coming from a place of ego or empathy. So I use a tool with my clients called the 3-point perspective perception. And it's kind of an extended view of when you're a child and maybe your parent tells you off for fighting with one of your siblings, or think about it from the other point of view. It's taking a helicopter view of what's your own point that you're trying to get across, what's the perspective from the other party, and what could they be hearing, not necessarily what you're saying, but how do they receive that information and decipher the information. And then what would be the perception from an outsider's view? What would their input be? What opportunities or options could they give to you to think about? In terms of overcoming negative emotions, some of the other things is all too often we can get caught up in those negative emotions. And a key mindset thing is around acknowledgement. So acknowledging a negative thought, but not letting it consume you. So being able to focus on the things that you can and cannot change as well, but then also how you choose to respond to them, because we all have a responsibility. And that comes out in any negative emotion, whether it's anger, fear, sadness, guilt. Someone cuts you up, you've got a choice to get angry with them and follow them home, or let it go, or how you choose to deal with that. So just being mindful and aware of that. So I use another situation that people could take away today, which is ABCs of their communications when it comes to negative feelings and thoughts. So A, acceptance of what you can and cannot change and what the situations are, your own behaviours and the boundaries that you can set around those responses, and also keeping it consistent as well. All too often with our negative emotions and our negative responses, we're inconsistent with our message, which only can amplify the situation. And I suppose a last point, and using kind of a coaching mindset, people use this in business mentoring, business coaching, but it can be used within the situation of divorce and separation as well, is the type of questions that you ask. So I work on a rule of never asking why. My mum always used to say why has a long tail, but it's why has a negative connotation to it. Why are you doing that? Why would you do that? If you're asking more open questions that give you the information and the data that can help you all move forward, so a what-based question, what would happen if, what would happen if we don't, etc. How, when, and where-based questions, because a why presupposes a negative connotation. All those kind of little mindset tweaks of how you look at and have a perception of things can help reduce some negative feelings.
Yeah, I think you may have answered my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. It's quite a difficult one because I find it difficult to do myself. How do you change your mindset?
Yep. Again, various tools through coaching, neuro-linguistic programming, cognitive behaviours can help you work with mindset. And it's not, again, a one-size-fits-all, because we all receive information differently. I'm what we would deem high auditory digital, so I internalise the voice in my own head when I work things through. Some people are very kinesthetic, which is feeling and emotion, and that still has a play on how you manage your mindset and your attitudes and approach towards negative feelings. So some other things that you can do, reframing is a brilliant one. And again, it's a bit similar to the 3-point perception projection, but it's, if you've ever received an email or a text message, work or personal, that you've read in a very different way to the way it was sent, it's looking at the reframing of it. So I don't know, as an example, if I have a client that's struggling with their teenager, for example, and they never listen to me, they're really strong-minded, they completely ignore every suggestion and advice I give them. Okay, well, they are evolving and they're becoming a young adult. The reframing side of that is actually looking at, they are very strong-minded. this is actually a skill and a strength for this individual, that they could become very successful in their career path or in their studies. And it's just looking at things from a different perception and thinking, what's the polar opposite to that negative situation? Some other things that you can do is listing positive learnings. So we've all had situations in the past that we've had to work through and overcome, whether that is a divorce and separation, whether it's an interview, a presentation at work. It's looking at the feedback that you've got and the learnings that you've taken from them. Again, that can actually help you realize that looking forward, you will be able to take positive learnings even from a negative situation. Another thing which I actually do quite a lot is something called a gratitude diary, or what I call attitude to gratitude, which is taking the time, if you are in the depths of quite a negative or even mild anxious state, is taking the time over the course of the day, or even at the end of the day. I do mine at night before I go to bed, and listing at least 3 positive things that you're grateful for that you've taken out of that day. Now, that could be something as simple as someone saying thank you for them holding the door on the way into the shop. Maybe not at the moment during lockdown because of distancing, but you get the idea. But other simple things, the appreciation of a good school report from your child, and things like that. The key to that is, as you build these up and do these daily, when you are having a more anxious state, a more negative state, and how you want to kind of flip that, is to go back and look at all the positives that have been around you in everyday life that sometimes we take for granted. And I think one thing that really to think about is a phrase, I can't remember it, but moments pass, they never last. There was a Danish philosopher called Søren Kierkegaard who said, life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. I've always felt that with neuro-linguistic programming, which I'm aware of because some advisors use it, I've always felt it's kind of got a negative connotation, because although I do understand the idea, like you're mirroring somebody's movement or their voice or their tone, but I've been reluctant to use it myself because to me it felt a little bit manipulative. How do you? What's your take on that?
Well, I think that's like most things. It's around a perception of what people feel about neuro-linguistic programming and various other tools and mindset techniques. For me, and especially for what I do, I've been a husband, I've been a father, I'm now a divorcee, I'm now a stepfather. One of the biggest benefits that I took from training in NLP and then molding it into and making it part of my divorce and separation coaching program is around the communication, so how to understand people. So everybody receives information differently. There's various studies, but they say that the human mind takes in per second, and I still think it's an unbelievable figure, but the human mind takes in per second anything between 15 to 20 million single pieces of information. Sounds kind of incomprehensible. Yeah, but it sounds kind of incomprehensible, but until you think about something, you don't realize what your subconscious mind is processing, and that's true of our communication. So even like right now, you're sitting down, until I say, can you feel the bottom of the seat on your bum, or can you feel the texture of the desk on your elbow, or the air from the aircon? Your mind does 3 things. It's generalizing, distorting, and deleting all this information that's coming to you at the same time, and it's saying to you all the time subconsciously, do I need to be aware that there are shoes on my feet? Do I need to be aware of my watch on my arm? It doesn't. So it's generalizing, distorting, and deleting. Out of that 15, 20 million single bits of information, we retain and store around 134, 135. And if you think about that from a communications aspect, it's how you're receiving that information, generalizing it, distorting it, deleting it, or storing it, and then using that to respond. So a mindfulness is a big way of molding that with other tools in terms of where I don't feel it's manipulative. I actually feel it's a benefit to help you understand the other point of view and how best to communicate with that person.
Very good. Tom, the reason you're here today is because of this coronavirus lockdown, because I did read a few weeks ago in China, the rate of divorce is at record levels because, of course, they're ahead of us in terms of being in lockdown longer than us. You can't, and also the Chinese, in my experience, tend to live mainly in apartments in cities, so they're really on top of each other, not like a big house where they can hide from each other all day and send each other WhatsApp messages. Anyway, so I was wondering, because this does affect people, and I'm going to come on to explain some of our experiences with our own clients in a moment. But Tom, do you have any tips for what I can do to reassure any of my clients who may be going through more anxiety during this difficult spell we're going through?
Yeah, sure. I think it depends more if we're looking at deeply rooted and quite severe clinically diagnosed anxiety, or if it's
Yeah.
more mild anxious states, nervousness, procrastination, even fears, because fears and anxiety come from a part of the brain called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala preys on uncertainty. It loves to let your imagination run wild with possibilities, and that's where we can start to kind of spiral, if you like.
Yes.
So in terms of some things that maybe you could do and for your clients that could do and people watching this, there's various things that we, from a mindfulness perspective, that you can do. Future pacing is one. So using internal active visualization to look at the event that maybe is in front of you that is causing this mild anxiety or this potential fear. I used an example earlier about presentation or interview. So I used future pacing with a client of mine who was worried about doing a big presentation because they've never done them before, public speaking. So future pacing, and that's all around where people have fears of failure, but failure is only feedback. So by future pacing, it's using active visualization, going to, in your mind's eye, where the event is 15 or 30 minutes after the event. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? Are you getting feedback? Are people wanting to engage with you? Have you got questions coming at you and things like that? The other thing to do is something called evaluating accuracy as well. So what are the truth facts, the underlined questions behind this uncertain thought process? So that gives you the data from previous experiences as well. That ties nicely with asking what and how, when and where questions as opposed to why. A couple of other things you can do is, I do this as well, listing highest positive intentions. So what were the learnings that you've taken from previous experiences where this situation or feeling has arisen? What has it taught you that you took away positively? So you actually learn that from your previous fears about public speaking, about having to communicate with your ex, what's been the positive outcomes and the positive intentions? And the last thing is releasing judgment as well, our own internal judgment and externally. Stop comparing to X, Y, Z, whether that's their investments, running your business, your competitors. This is a big thing for social media influencers at the moment from a mental health aspect, is they suffer greatly from when the likes and the shares and the comments tend to stop, and this internal judgment and releasing that and stopping this comparing to others, because you end up putting a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yes, very wise words, Tom, in this day and age. Well, thanks for your contribution so far. Just want to mention just a few things about how we work with specialists such as Tom. We've had a specialism in pensions on divorce for some years, because in our experience, matrimonial lawyers are excellent at handling divorce situations sensitively, but the one area they need the most help in is pensions, because pensions are notoriously complex, particularly final salary pensions. And even if you're a full-time pension specialist, you'll still come across something new. Not necessarily every day, but certainly every month, every year, you'll come across new things, because all schemes are different. All final salary pension schemes are different, but it's not just final salary pensions. So we work closely with matrimonial lawyers, coaches such as Tom, and other specialists such as accountants and actuaries. Our role is to really to focus in advising on the financial side, and Tom handles the emotional side of matters. We find that works very well in partnership. In fact, we are working on a joint case as we speak, because we think it's quite good if you can handle things emotionally really well. And it's challenging, particularly under coronavirus lockdown, then it does help you to come to a far better settlement with the other half. Because in my experience, I think I'm sure Tom will share this, that in my experience, if you fall out and argue and don't see eye to eye, don't attempt to see eye to eye, you end up with one heck of a big legal bill. Whereas if you do get on well together and come to some sensible outcome by using Tom's services to get you to think differently and to handle things more sensibly in a very emotionally distraught time for you, then overall I think it'd be better not just for you financially, but also ultimately, when you think about it, the most important people in all this is your children. You don't want to alienate them or upset them any more than they're already going through. Would you agree with that, Tom?
No, I would entirely. And like I say, I had my two sons from my first marriage, and my partner's two children from my stepchildren, or bonus children, as I like to call them. And it is about that. This kind of actually ties back, this answer, actually, to when you were asking about why someone else would need a divorce coach. And it's for the people that want to do it better, that want to have less stress, less anxiety. It's so hard to keep fighting all the time, and to keep coming up against those blockers. And through working through a collaborative process that actually benefits yourself, in many ways, it affects our careers and our jobs and our day-to-day mindset going through such a stressful situation such as this, which comes out into your children and even further into your parents and your siblings, friends, friendship circles. And one of the things that I always say with people is, think about if this was 15, 20, 30 years down the road, and it's your child now going through the situation of separation. And as children, we of our parents, we always want to do things better, and our parents always want us to do things better than they did, and to achieve more in life and things like that. And this is exactly the same. My separation and divorce has been a lot more positive compared to my parents, and how me and my ex-wife work. And it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. We had court hearings and the emails back and forth, and the unhappiness and the stress and the anxiety and the worry, or as I like to explain it, the world's worst game of chess emotionally. And we've come full circle to a point where Boxing Day last year, 2019, we actually had Boxing Day, belated Christmas Day dinner together with our respective new partners and all of the children. And the huge benefit for that is seeing the positives that come out of the children for their safety, their security. They now don't have to make decisions between who they communicate, how they communicate. As far as they're concerned, they now have a wider group of people that love and care for them, and that's got to be paramount at the end of the day. The benefit for your children.
Tom, I'm really reassured that you've had what appears to be the model divorce, because that certainly backs up service you're offering, of course.
Maybe I should have got my ex-wife here to come and co-present with me. I'll WhatsApp her now.
It's really amazing that you could have Boxing Day together, with your respective partners. I think that's good. I mean, personally, what I did with my divorce, which unfortunately was very acrimonious, my first marriage, and I don't really want to say much more about it other than that we didn't agree readily, which was a shame because it did cost a lot of money, and in the end there was no winners. There's no winners in a divorce case, and that's why I've been quite motivated ever since to help people in this situation based on my own experience, which wasn't a positive one. A divorce isn't positive, but it could have been handled better really by both of us, I would say. But anyway, Tom, it's been great. We're ahead of schedule. Unfortunately, there's no questions so far, as far as I can tell, but my glamorous assistant here, Chopin, is going to tell me otherwise.
Maybe we've got 2 questions.
No, they're just... Okay, there is a couple of questions. So tell a lie, Tom. First question, how long does it usually take to effectively change someone's mindset to deal with things better? Do you find that it's a quick transition or a gradual journey?
In all honesty, it is how long as a piece of string, because everybody is individual. I have some clients that I work with on 3 or 4 sessions. I have other clients that have been with me for 4 or 5 months. Okay. Likewise, it's a situation around the mindset tools and techniques, because there is also, whilst there is a step and a process to go through, it's using a variation of the tools and the techniques that can actually help you as an individual for the way that you receive and decipher information, how you learn and retain the information, and then how you project that. So that's one, it is a time factor, but 2, it's around tools. So for example, for one client, doing something called a collapsed anchor, it could be an immediate hit to help them go from a mild state of anxiety to calm or positivity or whatever the state is they want. Likewise, for another client, they might need 3 or 4 sessions of timeline therapy. So it really can vary. A lot of it comes down to the individual and how committed they are to doing the work, because there's a lot of internal homework to take away, things out. So it is down to the individual. There's no right or wrong answer to say it will take you 4 days or 4 sessions.
Very helpful. Now I've got a question to ask myself. Well, somebody's asked the question, so I'm going to read it out to myself. During the lockdown, I have found that I struggle to control my anxiety, especially when it comes to my finances. So, Tony, have you found that clients have panicked as much as you thought during the pandemic and stock market crash? Oh, this for you as well, Tom. And Tom, do you have any other advice on how I can reduce my fear when it comes to such market volatility? So maybe I could just answer it myself first. Fortunately, I've found there's been very, very little panic, which was both surprising and pleasing. But because I've been running this business for more than 30 years, I think I've trained my clients over so many years to not panic when markets crash. I've sent lots of blogs out. I have face-to-face meetings with clients and also video conference calls. And they've just got used to it. They've got used to markets fluctuating. They don't panic when markets fall. And in fact, I'm proud to say that more people invested after the market crashed than sold. Far more people invested. So I think that's very pleasing, the result with my own clients I've found, although that's contrary to the normal expectation, because normal human behavior in my experience is that when markets fall, people are more likely to sell then for fear of a further fall. Whereas history shows you're far better off investing when markets have fallen because you're buying shares at a discount, of course. So for you, Tom, if you can remember the question, it was, do you have any advice on how to reduce clients' fears and anxiety when there's market crashes like this? What would you advise?
Yeah, I think from a mindset perspective, some of the tools that you kind of mentioned there already, among others that you would go through a process with coaching, but some of them that I mentioned there around accuracy testing and the kind of what and how questions, because for argument's sake, if I'm speaking to a client who says I want to make more money, okay, for what purpose? And you've got to look at what's the underlying root cause to the question and to the thought process. So if someone's saying that they have a mild state of anxiety or anxious about the markets or a fear about where the markets may be going, they'll obviously seek professional advice on that from someone like yourself. But for their own mindset is to be looking at the lessons that they can take from that around what is the underlying fear. Is it a loss or fear of losing out, or what's the actual underlying reason? Because with if you look at a fear-based emotion, there's so many underlying subsections to that. So really understanding and asking questions of yourself. Okay, what is it that I'm actually fearful of? Right? How does that resonate with me? And what's the basis behind why I'm feeling that? Where can I find the resources, or what do I need to do, or what do I need to understand to alleviate that? It's a bit like when you're looking at someone that is in a state of procrastination or stopping themselves from getting going. Well, what's their motivator? So what do they need to be motivated by? What's driving that behind them? Because if there's not a core value, we call it your values hierarchy. It's actually your values that you build up through childhood of what's right and wrong. If you can understand the values behind why you're making that decision process and what it is that's stopping you as well and holding you back, then you can understand what the underlying reason is and come to a more congruent and more logical decision process.
Tom, that's very, very helpful. I found it very positive overall. I hope I'm never personally going to need your services because I've been through two already. So, but I'm sure that any clients of ours that would deal with you, and the ones who already have dealt with you, felt very reassured by you and really benefit from the coaching. So I really appreciate your time spent with us today. Very illuminating. And I thank all the attendees for attending today. So that's bye for now.
Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure, and have a great week, everyone.
Okay, and same to you and all the listeners.